Okay, this one's for Antiguous. You speak of Impressionists, and I mentioned the Boston School, but how about the work of the original ones? Claude Monet, Berthe Morisot, Camille Pissarro, Alfred Sisley, Auguste Renoir, Mary Cassatt, and Edgar Degas. If you look at their drawings, they use line and symbolism to express the real world, except Monet, who takes it to the idea of color and light. His pencils, he even did caricatures, seems to have the idea of line. Is this impressionist line, or how you go about it, understanding this way of drawing? I'm going to make a stab at what I think you might be trying to say there, Antiguous. And I'm going to go ahead and today and review, again, much as I don't really prefer to do this, I prefer to talk about the ideas of the Boston School exclusively, but these are related. And in fact, the importance of the overall group, that is the best ones of them, can't be denied. It's as much as I say it's Monet, there's an aspect of why it's Monet. Maybe we'll get to in the course of talking about this, but the others were all heading in the same direction, trying to paint the full color daylight, and plein air, out there in the landscape, which Degas wanted to. He was suggesting laws be created, or if he was a landowner, he'd just go out with his shotgun and take them out. So that should tell you something about Degas. But if you look at their drawings, they use line and symbolism. They're usually words that I don't use. Symbolism, I'm not sure what that means. I don't see what you call symbolism. I see line to express the real world, but symbolism, I'm not sure what it is, unless you mean actually, outlines of objects that are actually invisible, the line being invisible. If that's symbol, yeah. But I don't really think of that as symbolism. I think of that as what's classically been known as a convention. Something you can make the shape with, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is what the shape is. What the shape is of visually is just a fact about drawing, for example, shape, and so you can do shape exclusive of light, and you can do, and you'll see that in Degas. So I think maybe that's what you mean. But let's just look at the drawings for a second, then I'm going to look at the paintings, okay? I think I have that in that order. So here I'm offering you Monet up in the left, and there you are right in talking about he's actually here conveying light in drawings. You can see that the line is anything but conventional. It looks like it's intended wherever you see it to make something you see, something visual. And Pissarro isn't. He's a little different, and I suggest to you that it's probably his different background, but he does seem to be more inclined to sort of make houses and make things, and these ducks over here are his. But when you know what background he comes from, when you find that he's actually part of what we might call the Luminous group, before he's ever an Impressionist, you might give him a break there. But yeah, if you want to call that symbolism, though, I'm not sure how you mean that symbolism. I've done this with animals where you have seconds practically to draw these things, and you really are trying to find the shape, especially in the case of me talking about doing it with a goat or a bird. But it's just a fast way of getting around the figure, and then you'll have a second problem, which is the mass problem. Which isn't unusual even in Impressionists, right? So line into mass. So here's a Renoir. I have to make confessions about that. Renoir was a early favorite of mine, but probably just simply because I read the book about him, and so it was really I read it when I was probably a 14-year-old or 15-year-old kid, and I had no protection from romanticization of painters that goes on in this world. But since then, Renoir strikes me as being probably the most amateurish of that entire group until you get down to the low-level guys that you don't even think about. But But let's now move over to. Oh wait, I take that back. I really did mess you up on that last one. I said Pizarro. I said this is Sisley, not Pizarro. So I apologize. I sincerely apologize. This is Sisley, and then now I'm going to show you Pizarro. And Sisley is not the guy with the strange background in the strange luminous background, rather looking like Hudson River School painters. But this is the drawing. These are the drawings of Pizarro. Pizarro is funny in that he seems to have this sort of reminds me of one of the American painters who used to have this penchant to follow other people and to sort of paint like this one, paint like that one, and almost like ambulance chasing or something like that. Pizarro has a little bit of that feel about him. In this one here, though, this feels like what you might think of as Monet way of thinking, Monet way of drawing, not simple outlines of trees, which is, Corot was an early influence, a mentor of his. And Corot's way of drawing was actually to draw both sides of a tree in a classical style, much as Degas wanted to do. And it's no wonder that Degas thought highly of him as a draftsman. I mean, if you think of it as first being that way of managing the object. But then there's this other, and so this is probably from that same era. You can see that it's more or less academic looking. And then you get to this one, which is more Millet. And so I don't know if Millet was one of his influences, or what he's doing here, or if it's a copy of one. I've never seen a Millet that looks like that, but it looks awfully lot like Millet's way of thinking. So if it is Millet, there are some, if I have this, because I can only get this stuff offline, I don't have time to dig up all the little, somebody's got this under Millet and it's not Millet, but it has this look of Millet. And if it's Pizarro's, then it does show what I'm talking about. So, and then this is the Manet line into mass thing. Now remember, Manet is explicitly talking about Velázquez in his thinking. And he does have, you mentioned Antiguous, that sort of cartoon done by Monet, but Manet's got his own sort of way of what sort of apparently cartooning. Even his paintings at times wind up looking a little bit like a cartoon, not exaggerated or anything like that, but simplified. But you can see it in the dog, the line and the mass, the value masses, and they're broadly expressed, and the masses are. But the line leads, and then the mass follows, and that seems to be pretty typical. And but what you see in the eyes here is that very discussion. Notice the eyes of the. Now this is a portrait by Manet of Berthe Morisot, and that picture down here is one of her drawings, which you can see again is very much the line into form thing. But in both cases, you can see that the mass, the shape of the blob into, the dark blob going over like a comma to make the eye. You can see that Velázquez influence already right here. And so these are not outline drawings, even though this looks like an outline drawing. His model, by the way, don't take anything from this. I've never, just talking about what I see right now, but I've never seen anything by him that is particularly what I'd call classical. I mean, in the paintings, yeah, but I haven't seen drawings. I wasn't able to find any drawings that particularly look like that, but he looked like he might be capable of it. This is definitely a different approach, and he definitely flattens the form considerably more than Degas would ever do, or a typical draftsman, including Berthe Morisot in this picture. But here again, you can see this, there's not an obsession, as it were, with outline in a simplified and long-studied way. It's line and mass, and they're intermixed with each other. One follows the other. And back again. The way we were taught, I was taught to draw an outline and then find a shadow line, mass it, and all sorts of things like that. When I found the visual order, I found myself articulating a reading line, and then quickly massing it right away to some degree. So it turned into a silhouette. And I think you saw that if you look at the video where I'm doing a start of a charcoal drawing, the horse. So here's Degas, and this is genuine draftsmanship. I mean, by the way, when you look at all these pictures together, you can see that there's one guy here who stands out. This guy is absolutely a master draftsman, and he makes the other ones look like they never studied the form. And to some degree, it may be true, but Degas hung out and drew academically with any number of guys who were academically trained themselves. And his background with Louis Lamotte is this kind of line into form drawing, no question about it. His direct teacher, one of his teachers. And but here you can see him in his explorations of the remarkable gestures of the figure. At times you see the legs bending like this, bending like it's really beautifully articulated, beautifully seen. But yeah, it's outline into mass. It simply is outline into form, if you like to call it that way. But line, shape, and then form. And Mary Cassatt isn't far behind him. Her approach seems to be basically the same. She's considerably messier with her massing, so more like a Manet. But yeah, and you can see there's a little bit more of an orientation, at least in this picture, say, about toward light. Yeah, Degas is not neglectful of that sort of thing either when it's a significant player. So let's just look at this now. This is about drawing, I think. You said, so look at the work of Monet and all these other people. If you look at their drawings, they use, okay, blah, blah, blah. And then, and is this the Impressionist line or how you go about understanding this way of drawing? Now, you're talking about drawing, but you're talking about Monet in the larger sense. So I'll just show you the actual work and talk about drawing and how it affects these guys. So you know this guy is the master of spots, right? And his drawing shows up through the back door, you might say. He isn't drawing an object in any way. He's putting down spots, and then he's building and building and building on them. These are some of the most remarkable things ever studied. I mean, and these are long, profound studies. I say long, meaning I don't know how long they took in a day or how many days or any of those things. I have not made a science of that, but the discussion's out there, as you can see. And by the way, I recommend Rewald for way better information than I have to offer you myself out of any of my personal studies. But the pursuit of light for its own pleasure, for its own joy, that's the influence on everybody eventually. When you look at so many of the other painters like Renoir, I mean, these guys are like, they're a bit prettified. Renoir is a little bit prettified. This is all outlines, by the way, looking like it's trying to be a mural or something. It's all outliney in the classic sense. Yet he never seems to quite get himself over to this place, this landscape. I say to this place, I mean, he never seems to be preoccupied with light the way an impressionist, the way I think of it, does, and certainly the way the Boston School thinks. But this one here is, you'd say full of light, but it's very difficult to tell the truth about this thing. What is that odd blue thing back there? So that's one of those things where there's a certain purification in all this work. They look like a certain kind of, maybe almost a candy box sort of approach to color and everything. And postcard, whatever. But he's the least of these guys, to my thinking. And Sisley is the guy that you might be thinking about that actually manages to put, academic lines into things quite frequently. He doesn't always do it, and eventually he's considerably like a Boston School painter, and I shouldn't say eventually because I don't know these time frames. But there's a certain sense of color-related truth, color and light truth, very much like the rest of the Boston School but certainly of the Monet model. But you can see that he uses line, but like the rest of these guys, now here it looks like academic outline, like he drew outlines, like he drew these objects, and they painted between the lines. But these other ones look considerably less like that. They look much more like the Boston School would have handled it. So when line shows up in this kind of work, it wasn't he drew trees with their outlines and then drew other things with their outlines. So he built it up again. He looks like he built it up, just like a Monet would. By the way, Monet, you mean the later Monet, right? I'm really talking about what we call it, atypical Monet. But this is Pizarro. Now look at this up in the left corner. That picture there, and there's quite a handful of them that are just pure luminous paintings. except for the figures, they could have been painted on the Hudson River or by any of those guys, and quite a number. And he worked with Corot, so this appears to be his background. And then, of course, he wanders, and by the end of his life, he's doing things that I just sort of, a little bit of Millet here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And you almost feel sorry for the guy. He's got this kind of strength and this kind of history. But some of this, I do look and wonder. Now, I don't know why I'm talking about that, because that's not what you want to talk about drawing. So if you want to look at that little thing up there on the right, you can see that the difference between that and a Monet approach is pretty clear, isn't it? I mean, this guy really does want to make sure you know it's a window, where Monet is really trying to sort out the quality of the light movements and the light relationships. This has nothing like that sense of a feast of color, not at all. In fact, none of these do, actually. And that's an interesting thing, because Monet, I think, leads directly to Degas. Let's go through some other guys, and I'll talk about that. But Monet began to find the music in color. And I don't get the sense, I mean, this is very beautiful. Not to say, these are both very nice. This is a little unambitious coloristically. This is just nothing compared to the grand movements and the music of the Monets. And this looks like a sort of an imitation, and this just almost looks to like a very, very juvenile phase of figuring out this stuff. And he's trying to combine maybe Impressionism with storytelling pictures. And I'm not actually saying anything about these, except that I don't perceive that the approach is much different. He hangs on to his object mindset, but I don't see that he's simply setting up outlines. It's hard to follow, hard to figure that out. I will never make, by the way, my life study that of any painter at all. I'm looking for what will service me to get to truth. So every time I see something out here in the larger world, I'm saying, oh, that's better than what I do, and in terms of the truth to nature. And I'm looking to be powered up. I'm looking for some authoritative mastery of the look of nature. So yeah, that can be found, as Degas said, that can be found anywhere. So Morisot is again, she's far more typical of a lot of what was going on back then. A certain amount of drawing and a certain amount of mass, and I've just simply wanted to say, line seems to always lead and sometimes be left there. It's not that carefully articulated Ang line or Degas, but it's much more like Manet. And here you can see Manet actually articulating lines. People studying Impressionism, I remember when we were young students, people would just assume it was on one thing, right? And it's not one thing. And we used an approach of throwing down a few lines like this here, and then just checking out colors, just hitting color notes. That was just to orient the thing on the page. And then you hit color notes, and the idea was to lose the line, to lose the outline. So it became a Monet kind of a thing. But there's a certain tendency of Manet to really love a crispy line, let's put it that way, and to play games, fine articulate lines, and play them up, much like a Boston School painter. Yeah, I don't know what else I should say about these guys, but you can see he's got a mass orientation, but he's onto line all the time, meaning onto silhouette all the time. So, but it's not the Monet model. It's this Manet really is the other model, right? And it's the one that probably Sargent was more closely akin to. And then, of course, you have Mary Cassatt, and so she's that mixture again of what Degas is doing. She's very carefully studying the outline, and I'd say studying the outline, studying form. She has a great sense of form, and yet she's not. I mean, she's doing line, but she's just messing with. She has a good sense of messing with color in an impressionist way. So it seems to be a similar thing, except her orientation around articulate drawing and expressive drawing. In the sort of she seems to have more of a classical bent that way, and that it's more like Degas. Virtually none of these really have a great sense of depth. at all. You might notice that when you start talking about the Boston School. But there's something flat about it, and then you read things about wanting the picture to be flat. Ang talks about wanting the picture to remain flat. Well, it's an interesting question, but once you get to the Boston School, that changes considerably. So then here's Degas, and this is what I was talking about, where you see Monet, and you see the music he's finding in color, and then you see this guy who's actually an intellect when it comes to design. And you find him playing the color games, these beautiful pinks playing off of these, the turquoise playing off, all these colors playing into and out of each other. And I remember this guy's an imaginative painter, but he's now beginning to use color, the live color that you almost feel like he stole from Monet. It wasn't so much that everybody else didn't see it before. It's just that, painters have to see it in paint before they believe it. It's an odd thing. So the breakthrough guy is really unusual. The guy who really breaks through. That's what you give Monet so much credit for. But this is Degas, in my view, using the Monet knowledge also, right? And I want to tell you, he was actually a little bit older, I think, or maybe he was exactly the same age as Monet. I've mentioned that to you before, but I've forgotten. But so even though he's painting outdoors in both these settings here, he does not pose models outdoors and make them stand funny for some long period of time while he's trying to get the atmosphere. I would suggest to you that what this suggests in both of these diagonal pictures, these pictures across from each other here, is the use of memory outdoors. And that I know something about. So I'm betting that that's something he's based on memory, the outdoor unit, shall we say. And came back in with 3 or 4 notes that would be enough to set up, the 1, 2, 3, 4, to set up the entire ground on which he's going to then just play the colors. Probably using colors based on what he's already put down here in the study. Who knows? There's so many different ways, of course, to approach imaginative painting. But of course, we know he did lots of drawings, all outlines, all the time. Now, in Degas, though, and I don't have to show it here, but there are a number of spots in this little cup. Maybe would be an example of it, where he gets lost and found. He gets the idea. I want to tell you, where you can really see that he's owning that idea of being purely visual right there. Do you see that? And this is one of those places, Antiguous, where you'd be saying, well, what kind of drawing do you think he used there? It's possible, he used an outline, but it certainly doesn't show it much, does it? It looks like he used blobs. So, and these guys were all feeding off of each other. They're all aware of each other's works, and they were, and this is bound to be happening. But in the meantime, he's drawing an arm like a classical arm would be drawn, and so on. But yeah, so that's what I see frequently. I'm glad I have that here. I totally didn't remember to put one in. I'm just off the cuff here. I just pick the pictures and then see what happens, okay? So I'm just going to mention Decamp. The drawing thing, you could say this is line drawing. So these trees are really lines, but they're only lines where they're really lines. And this is that whole idea of the mass, and in this case, the textured mass, the flat masses, right? The dark mass, the light mass, the movements in the mass of color, and where there's line. And that's the model. So there's a line thing when it's needed, and in some places it looks like a long articulation of line, and some other guys will peck at it, and Tarbell, I think, in particular. But here he is also using, obviously, linear stuff, lines and stuff, but you can see it's not that academic articulation of it, and it's line into mass again, which you'd expect. There's Monet and Benson. It's late at night, by the way, for this one. There's Tarbell and Benson. How many others have I said wrong? I'll have to pay attention. There's Tarbell and Benson in the New England Light. This is quite a large picture. I don't think the figures are life-size, but it's a pretty big picture. And I don't get the sense that his composition is as exciting as Degas, color outdoor lighting, but this is pretty delightful distribution of these golds and the interplay of the, shall we say, the blues, and they're just wildly interesting combinations. Look at all these different blues, and this is that idea of searching for the truth, and you just get richer and richer and richer in your explorations, and richer in the sense of things you can make music with, or what makes the music even. So there's Benson, and that's that same thing. There's a certain amount of line, but it's not predominantly line except where there's line, right? So your drawing is a mass-line combination, and it can start this way and it can start that way. It depends on what you find most most amenable to the needs in that picture. Now here's Bunker, and Bunker was the teacher of Paxton, and you can see Paxton has an orientation rather like Sorolla of wanting to have the outline of things and then color it in. And that model really is anathema to Boston School thinking, but it's pretty much anathema to most Impressionism in the larger sense. It's just not typical. Sorolla makes something of it, and this does look like a Sorolla. This guy would have seen Sorolla by this time, by the way, just so you know. I should say likely would have, because he was around. He was visible in the U.S. So back to Bunker, and Bunker, if you know Bunker at all, I probably should have shown another picture, but he was an articulate draftsman, outline draftsman in the Degas sense of that word. And there's a picture of trees without leaves on them that you might want to look at. It's just it was mind blowing to those of us who were trying to figure out drawing and figure out form and that sort of thing. To see this thing, he must have spent forever on the dang thing, but he studied virtually every branch. But the later, you can see here, this is a start or some sort of a lay-in for that floral at the Gardner Museum. And you don't find line drawing in this picture. Now you could say, well, of course you don't, because this is blobs. Well, no, a line guy is going to find lines. He's going to draw out lines around things. This guy is doing blobs. And at some points he may articulate a reading point or another somewhere else. But its orientation is wildly different, and he did try to pick up and follow through on that lesson, the Monet lesson. But this is as wonderful as landscape painting gets in my mind in terms of truth and the excitement of the notes when they reach this level of chromaticity, shall we say. Again, I'm going to suggest to you that when there's really squared up stuff and you have to draw it, you draw it, but it doesn't mean that you started with that. In his early drawings, it does look like he drew boats and things like that, and then he put other things in. This doesn't have that feeling. This looks like the drawing came later. And here again, you can see that even though this is what you might call a line, you can see it's broken up. It's actually not articulated in a single stroke, which is one of the nice advantages because the nuance shifts in a tree like that can be all over the place. And if you draw it as a hard thing, you're going to be hard-pressed indeed to go back and lose some of its edges, as some people believe is a good thing, or a possible thing even. He is actually operating more clearly from a lost and found model or from a blob model. But, again, it's a combination, and people do it slightly differently each time. So let's just have a look. And Hale was the guy that brought the ideas back of what Monet was doing initially, I think, to these guys, along with Lilla Cabot-Perry. So there he is doing some curious things. This might fit into that discussion about, did you get these girls to stand there all at once, or did they and just stay there for an hour or two, several days in a row, especially this one bent over here? Or did you have them going in and out of it, one of them taking a rest while two others stayed there? There's all kinds of ways, and we do them all. But my guess is that this would have been a particular type of day and time of day, and he would probably have posed them for the period of time that made sense. Has that feeling of being early morning, sun being way low. On the other hand, it's not that easy for me to tell you exactly what it is. But this is sort of Hale. This is just Hale, so it's just really kind of what it comes down to. I'll just walk you back through them and see if I think of anything else I should have said. I got to keep remembering drawing. In all these cases, there's a line component, if that's what you mean by drawing. There's even a form component. You talk about the sense of roundness. And if that's what you mean by drawing. And there's another sense, if you mean by drawing spatial distance, like the distance from here to there, that feeling that these things have distance between them, which is this one very truly suggests strongly and truly visual painting. The articulation of edges is a huge factor in these things that makes things go forward and go backward and come forward. I was going to talk about that, and this is a pretty prime example of it here. You can see the sharp edges, the dark high contrast will be tending to be forward, and there'll be a distance even between this one and that. And you can feel distances in this, which is when you're talking about the earlier guys, including Degas, there's no sense of that in any significant way. It's done differently, shall we say. I think I will just keep trucking through here, trying to remember that your point was to ask about their drawing. This Benson Decamp had a great sense of form. I really think he had the best sense of form of that entire group there. It's most draftsman-like execution when you look at the portraits, for example. Yeah, I think I've said enough about Degas. Mary Cassatt, who he admired, whose work he admired. By the way, this is that use of color in a purely abstract way that really does come out of, or it's similar to Degas. Now, this guy Mary Cassatt had the influences of the Japanese as well. But so these are like patently obvious color blobs. Green, this particular red going to this particular green, and these darker reds and these darker greens. But you can see that how they're playing in a very simple set. In both cases here, a very simple set of colors. This one hasn't quite gotten developed yet. Maybe it really is, but if it is, it's this overall neutral green plus these reds and these neutralized mid chroma. This again, you can't really judge these, and I speculate about what those colors really are. I think I've seen that picture, so I should be able to do better than that, but I can't. Yeah, so I think I've said enough about Manet, and you'll see plenty of these, by the way, in that phase there, where people like Blum, who went to Japan. You'll see his work evoking this, evincing this kind of line into mass knowledge more heavily on the line, more a certain fine line too. And but yeah, that's what we have. Enjoy thinking about that, and I hope I gave you something to amuse you, if not something of value. Just looking at great drawing is always a major delight. This is something, instead of just copying the Barg things. I mean, I don't know what they are, but copying a passage done this masterfully by a fine draftsman, and grant, or even more of this, or taking the whole thing, but the sense of form that's here. This is interpretation of form, which is what Degas defines drawing as, this combination of line into mass. Cast drawing is copy noodling, and but this gives you the mind of the artist, whereas copy noodling doesn't do that as much. It gives you mechanics, but this is what you want to get. You want to get the mind of the master. Copy some of their work when you want to get the mind of a painter. Copy the work for a bit. All right, and that's true of this guy. Any of these guys, just find out what they're about. That was Manet, by the way. So there you are, Antiguous, causing troubles as usual. I hope life's good for you guys over there right now, and you're getting plenty of work time in. In any case, thank you. Do share, even like if we have that possibility, but subscribe, donate, thanks, much appreciated. And these comments, keep them coming in. I'm looking for more right about now. I think I may have one more left. So if you could do that for us, that would be great. And all right. Till next time.